Former United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, that's Judge Navi Pillay, is on the line from Durban to share her insights on the former UN Chief Kofi Annan, who passed away earlier today. The jurist, who's known for her tireless efforts and dedication in championing the centrality of human rights in the pursuit of sustainable peace and development in the world, worked closely with Annan on Rwanda and Syria. Let's cross now to Durban, where Judge Pillay is on the line. Good afternoon, Judge Pillay, or good evening rather, and thank you for your time on the SABC News Desk.
Good evening to you and to all viewers. And thank you for your program.
Judge, a great loss not only for Africa but for mankind. How are you digesting news of Kofi Annan's passing? You were both to speak at the United Nations General Assembly on the 30th of September, and he had already accepted that invitation, we understand.
Yes, I mean, I'm really shocked and saddened. I also met him a great deal in Geneva, where he was based, and I'm in touch with his foundation, and I'm associated with the peace plan that he was working on for the world. So really, all the comments so far are true. He played a larger-than-life role as UN Secretary General. And what's remarkable is that he did not come from the outside, from a political position such as a former president or a former minister in government. He rose through the ranks, so he knew what it was like to be a worker, an ordinary staff. And then he was in charge of peacekeeping. Now, the importance of that is, we must remember that the United Nations is a body of governments, and they are interested in solving their own disputes. So it was a new thing for Kofi Annan to persuade them to go the extra mile and contribute towards peacekeeping, which means that when governments, particularly in developing countries, are unable to handle rebel groups and warfare inside their country, that the UN should help by sending in peacekeepers.
Judge,
so that's remarkable.
Judge, you worked as Under-Secretary on the Rwanda Tribunal, and back then Kofi Annan was heavily criticized and even accused of not doing enough to protect against that genocide. How did that impact on his work going forward? Like you say, as head of peacekeeping, because he did emerge as a stalwart in international criminal justice and rendering justice to the Rwandan victims at that time.
Yes, you know, Kofi Annan was then head of peacekeeping, and General Dallaire, the five-star general from Canada, who was in charge of the UN peacekeeping forces there, appealed to Kofi Annan to let him confiscate these caches of weapons that he found all over. And he didn't get the authority from Kofi Annan. And as a consequence, 10 Belgian blue helmets were killed, and of course 800,000 people were killed. So this was a real blot on his career, but he explained how his hands were tied. It's really a decision from powerful countries such as the United States. You will recall that even President Clinton went to Rwanda to apologize for failing to act to prevent the genocide. So I think that Kofi Annan felt so deeply over this failure that he poured his energy into supporting Rwanda's campaign for justice. And he was of the Rwanda Tribunal. So during his years, 1996 to 2006, I was judge and president on the Rwanda Tribunal and judge on the International Criminal Court, and I saw him frequently as Secretary General. He was, you know, from his heart, a supporter of the rule of law. He made powerful statements about that. He got all states, governments, heads of states at a summit to commit to respecting the rule of law, and he supported international criminal justice.
Judge, just on that note, we always remember Annan as being soft-spoken, gentlemanly ways always. conducted himself with such great humility, but he was occupying a role that put a great deal of political pressure on him, like you were saying, especially from the United States, the most powerful nation in the world at that time, who always reminds everyone that they contribute the most to the global body at that time in terms of finances. How did he handle that pressure, and how did he resist to uphold the rule of law and principles of the United Nations, like you're saying he did?
Yes, it is a political office that he occupies. You know, he's accountable to governments. He has to be diplomatic, and he couldn't tell the world of all the pressures put on him. And this is why there was even the Srebrenica disaster where Dutch soldiers were involved and 8,000 Muslims were killed. That was the other catastrophe. But the attack on Iraq, which was committed by the United States without the sanction of the Security Council, is what particularly upset him. And he mentions that when he was leaving the United Nations. So that's when he came out openly critical of the Iraq attack, because it bypassed the Security Council.
Very quickly, Judge Pillay, we are running out of time. He was trying to broker peace in Syria, but he was disappointed with what he called hypocrisy by the USA and Russia and some European allies. Tell us what he said in conversation with you, because he did feel that these nations did not want him to succeed ultimately.
Yes, it was at a dinner at his house, where a number of us UN USGs were present, when he said, well, here am I being asked to head the Syria peace negotiations, but the very people who appointed me are undermining me because they're continuing to support factions, provide arms, and so on. And this really disappointed him. With all his experience, he had done excellent work in Kenya. He could have played a role in Syria if he had been properly supported.
How should we best remember an African hero of this stature when it comes to his intellectual heritage and legacy he's left us, Judge Pillay?
We should remember that long after his stint as Secretary General, the world still needed him, and he provided his services free of charge and continued to care about the world's problems. And that's his legacy, that he gave his all to all of us, but particularly cared about developing countries, and mainly Africa.
Judge Navie Pillay, thank you for your time on the SABC News Desk. The judge joining us on the line from Durban on the Globe this evening.